At 73, she was left to die, but what she found in the woods had been waiting for her all along. The car door clicked behind her, locked from the outside. Evelyn didn't turn right away. The engine faded down the logging road, swallowed by pine and distance. Cold air settled in, quiet and sharp. She stood there, listening, not for the car to come back, but trying to understand if it ever would. What would you do in her place? Stay or start walking? The sound was small. A soft, mechanical click. It shouldn't have mattered. Not out here. Not in a place where the trees stood closer together than people ever did, where the road looked less like something built and more like something carved out of reluctance. But Evelyn Mercer heard it clearly. Too clearly. The car door had locked. From the outside. She stood beside the passenger side for a moment longer than most people would. One hand still hovered near the handle, fingers curled slightly as if the motion hadn't quite finished. The metal was already cold beneath her skin. It held no warmth from the drive, no trace of the heat that had filled the cabin just seconds earlier. Inside the car, Caleb didn't turn. He adjusted something near the steering wheel, not urgently, not nervously, just casually, like he was settling in before a long drive. The engine idled low, a steady hum that felt out of place against the stillness pressing in from all sides. "Caleb?" she said. Her voice didn't carry far. The trees absorbed it, softened it, returned nothing. He shifted the car into gear. Gravel cracked under the tires as the vehicle rolled forward. Slow at first. Careful, like he didn't want to throw dust or spin out. Like this was just another turn on a familiar road. Evelyn took a step forward. Wait. But the word came too late. Or maybe it didn't come at all in the way she thought it had. The car was already moving past her, the red glow of the taillights bright against the dull green and gray of the forest. For a second, she thought he might stop, might realize something had been left unfinished. A sentence, a thought, a person. He didn't. The road curved slightly ahead, bending around a thick stand of lodgepole pines. The taillights followed that curve, shrinking, dimming. Then, just before they disappeared completely, one flickered as if the car hit a dip in the road. And then there was nothing. No engine, no light, just the wind. It moved through the trees in slow, uneven passes, not strong enough to shake the branches, just enough to make them whisper against each other. The sound layered itself over the silence, filling it without breaking it. Evelyn didn't move. Not right away. She stood where the road widened just enough for a car to pull off. The ground beneath her boots was uneven, packed dirt mixed with loose gravel. She noticed that. The way the surface shifted slightly when she adjusted her weight. The way the edges of the road weren't clean, but softened by moss and fallen needles. She looked down the direction Caleb had gone, then back the way they'd come. Both directions looked the same. Trees, close, quiet, indifferent. A faint smell hung in the air, wet earth, pine sap, something older beneath it, the kind of scent that settled into your clothes without asking. It reminded her of places she hadn't been in years, places she hadn't thought about. She adjusted the strap of the canvas bag on her shoulder. It had been hers for decades. The fabric had worn smooth in some places, rough in others. Familiar, reliable. Unlike this. Her other hand still held the metal thermos. It felt heavier now than it had in the car. Not physically, just present. Like something she hadn't decided what to do with yet. Evelyn turned slowly in a full circle. There were no houses, no fences, no signs of anything built or maintained. Even the road felt temporary, like it could disappear if left alone long enough. There were no tire marks beyond the ones Caleb had just made. No footprints except her own. She stepped closer to where the car had been. The imprint of the tires was clear, fresh, sharp edges in the dirt. They led in. They led out. She followed them with her eyes until they curved out of sight. Then she looked at the place where the passenger door had been. At her feet. There was nothing dropped, nothing forgotten, no sign that this moment had been interrupted or rushed. It had been completed. That thought settled in slowly. Not all at once. Evelyn drew in a breath, shallow and careful, like she didn't want to disturb something she couldn't see. The air was colder than she expected. It touched the back of her throat differently, sharper, cleaner, less forgiving. She glanced at her wrist out of habit. No watch. She hadn't worn one in years. Time felt different here anyway. Thinner, less defined. Another gust of wind moved through the trees, this one a little stronger. It brushed against her coat, slipped through the seams near her collar. She felt it settle against her skin before fading again. Evelyn looked down the road one more time. Then she spoke, quieter now. Caleb? The name stayed close to her. It didn't travel. It didn't come back. She nodded once. A small movement, almost unnoticeable. Not agreement. Not acceptance, just acknowledgement. Something had happened. She just hadn't decided yet what to call it. Evelyn Mercer shifted her weight again, feeling the ground, the air, the space around her, as if it might explain itself if she paid enough attention. She didn't feel panic. Not yet. What she felt was something slower, something that took its time. A question, forming without words. And beneath it, something else. A quiet, steady sense that whatever this was, it hadn't been an accident. She stood there a moment longer. Then she tightened her grip on the thermos and listened. Because out here, that was the only thing that made sense to do. Evelyn stood still long enough for the quiet to settle properly. Not the kind of quiet you get in a house when the television's off. Not the kind that comes late at night when everyone else has gone to bed. This was different. This kind of quiet didn't belong to people at all. It belonged to the land. She let her breathing slow until it matched the rhythm of the place. In through the nose, out through the mouth, small, steady pulls of air that didn't waste heat. She didn't think about that consciously. Her body just remembered. Then, slowly, she turned her attention back to the road. The tire tracks were still there, clear, sharp, fresh enough that the edges hadn't softened yet. She stepped closer, careful with her footing, and looked down at them. 2 lines in the dirt, straight in, straight out. No hesitation marks, no uneven turns, no signs of stopping twice or correcting direction. Caleb had known exactly where he was going. Evelyn followed the tracks with her eyes again, this time more carefully. She traced them back toward where the car had disappeared, watching how they curved slightly before vanishing behind the trees. Then she looked behind her. Same pattern. The tracks didn't wander there either. They came in clean, deliberate, like someone following a route they didn't need to question. She pressed her lips together. That mattered. Her mind didn't rush ahead. It didn't jump to conclusions the way it might have when she was younger. It moved slower now, more careful. It picked up one piece at a time and turned it over until it made sense. She adjusted the strap of her bag again, more firmly this time. The cold was starting to settle deeper into her fingers. Not painful yet, but present. A dull stiffness that warned of what would come if she let it. Evelyn tucked her free hand into her coat pocket and started walking a few steps along the road. Not far, just enough to feel the ground, to test the space. The gravel shifted under her boots. The sound was loud in the stillness, too loud. She stopped, listened. Nothing answered back. No distant engine, no voices, no movement beyond the slow breathing of the trees. She turned again, scanning the edges of the road. No structures, no broken fence lines, no old signage. Nothing to suggest this place had been used recently, or often. And yet, the road itself was there. Not completely overgrown, not erased, maintained just enough. Evelyn's brow tightened slightly. That didn't match. She stepped back toward where she had been standing when the car left, back to the exact spot. She looked down again, this time at her own footprints beside the tire marks. Then she looked at the space between them. No second set of footprints. Caleb hadn't gotten out of the car, not after they stopped. The memory came back in pieces. The drive up, the way he'd kept both hands on the wheel, even when the road didn't require it. The way he'd spoken less as they got further from town. "You'll like it out here," he had said at one point. Not looking at her when he said it. She had nodded, not because she agreed, just because the moment didn't call for disagreement. He'd always been like that, even as a boy. Saying things that sounded complete but weren't, leaving gaps in conversations that other people were expected to fill. She hadn't filled them this time. She had just watched and waited. Another piece surfaced. The phone call a week earlier. "Come stay with me for a while, Grandma. It'll be easier. You don't need to worry about the house anymore." Easier. That word had stayed with her. Not comforting, not reassuring, just convenient. Then there were the smaller things. Her bank card not working one afternoon. "Oh, I fixed that," Caleb had said. "Too many automatic charges. I consolidated everything." She hadn't asked him to. "The doctor's appointment that got canceled. They rescheduled you. I'll take you next week." Next week never came. Evelyn exhaled slowly. The air felt colder now, sharper against her throat. She turned back toward the direction Caleb had gone. "You'll be fine here for a while." That had been the last thing he said. Not "I'll be back." Not "wait here." Not even "I'm sorry." Just that. For a while. Evelyn stood with that thought. Let it settle the way the quiet had. Then she looked down at the road again. At the tracks. At the clean, deliberate path in and out. She shook her head once. Small, controlled. "No," she said under her breath. Not loud, not angry, just clear. This wasn't confusion anymore. Not really. She took another slow breath, feeling the cold move deeper into her chest. Then she turned slightly, angling her body toward the trees instead of the road. Because standing here wasn't going to change anything. And waiting only made sense when someone was coming back. Evelyn Mercer adjusted her grip on the thermos. Looked once more at the empty curve of the road, and understood something she hadn't quite put into words yet. He hadn't left anything unfinished. He had done exactly what he meant to do. The quiet didn't feel the same after that. It felt heavier, closer, like it had moved in a few steps without her noticing. Evelyn didn't argue with it, She just stood there a moment longer, long enough to feel the truth of it settle into place, before she finally moved. Not fast, not certain, but forward. Because there was nothing else left to do. Evelyn stepped off the center of the road without thinking about it too much. The gravel gave way to softer ground almost immediately. Pine needles layered over damp soil, quiet under her boots. The trees stood closer here, their trunks tall and straight, rising without much branch until higher up where the light thinned out. She didn't choose a direction so much as drift into one, away from where the car had gone. That felt right, or at least less wrong. The cold settled in more firmly now, not sharp yet, just steady. It moved through her coat slowly, like it had time to work its way in. She flexed her fingers inside her pocket, testing them. Still responsive. Good, she adjusted her grip on the thermos, then shifted it to her other hand. The metal was colder now, leaching warmth instead of holding it. She tucked it under her arm for a moment, letting her coat block the worst of it. Her steps were careful. Not cautious in the sense of fear, but deliberate. She placed each foot with attention, watching where the ground dipped or rose, where roots pushed up just beneath the surface. The forest floor wasn't flat. It never was. It rolled gently, uneven in ways that could turn an ankle if you weren't paying attention. She paid attention. The light had already begun to change, not dramatically, just a subtle shift. The gray of the sky deepened, filtering through the branches in thinner strips. The air carried a faint edge to it now, something drier, colder. The kind that hinted at evening even if you didn't know the time. Evelyn walked. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Time didn't hold shape the way it used to. The sounds followed her. Her boots pressing into the ground, the faint crack of a twig now and then. Her breath, slightly uneven but controlled. She kept it that way on purpose. Slow in, slow out. Then, after a while, something else. A thought. It came quietly, the way most important ones did. You could sit down. The ground looked soft enough, thick with needles, insulated from the cold underneath. If she just lowered herself for a moment, just to rest, it wouldn't hurt anything. Her legs were already beginning to feel the strain. Not pain, just a growing heaviness, the kind that made stopping feel reasonable. She slowed. Not stopping, just slowing. Her gaze dropped to the ground ahead of her. The pattern of brown and green, scattered cones, broken branches, small details, easy to focus on. You could sit, just for a minute. Evelyn's breath hitched slightly as the thought settled in more firmly. She knew that voice. Not a literal one, just the body, trying to negotiate. Then something else surfaced, not from the forest, from somewhere older. A sound, tinny, distorted. She could almost hear it. A voicemail. She hadn't played it in years, but she didn't need to. It was still there, stored somewhere behind everything else. Ruth's voice. You stop moving in the cold, Ev. That's when it gets you. Not when you're fighting it. When you think you can rest. There had been a laugh after that. Light, familiar. Ruth had always laughed at things that weren't funny. Evelyn slowed even more, then stopped, just for a second. The quiet pressed in again, closer this time. Her legs felt heavier the moment she stood still. The cold noticed. It moved in faster, filling the spaces her motion had been holding open. She stood there, listened. The forest didn't change, didn't react, didn't care. Evelyn drew in a breath. deeper this time. Held it, then let it out slowly. "No," she said. The word came out rough, not loud, just enough to give it shape. She shifted her weight, took another step, then another. The movement felt harder now. Her legs resisted for a moment before falling back into rhythm. But once they did, it returned, the steady forward pull, not strength, not energy, just continuation. She didn't look back. There was nothing there for her. The ground began to slope slightly upward, not steep, but enough that she felt it in her thighs. The effort warmed her a little, just enough to take the edge off the cold settling in her chest. Her breath came a little faster now. She adjusted. Shorter steps, more controlled. The sounds changed subtly as she moved deeper. The wind didn't reach as easily here. The trees blocked it, softened it. The air felt thicker, quieter. Her boots sank slightly in places where the soil held more moisture. Once she stepped on a patch that gave more than expected, her foot sliding a few inches before catching. She steadied herself without thinking. Didn't fall. Kept moving. Time stretched. The light dimmed another shade. Evelyn's fingers tingled now when she flexed them. Not numb, not yet, but close enough that she noticed. She pulled her hand from her pocket and tucked it under her opposite arm, pressing it against her side. Held it there for a few steps, then switched. Small adjustments. Constant, necessary. The thought of sitting came back once more. Quieter this time, less convincing. She didn't answer it, just walked. Her breathing settled again into a rhythm she could maintain, not comfortable, but sustainable. That was enough. She focused on the next step, then the next. Not the distance, not the direction, just the act of moving. The forest didn't open up, didn't offer anything, but it also didn't stop her. And for now, that was all she needed. Evelyn Mercer kept walking. Because stopping, that was the only thing she understood clearly now, and it wasn't an option. Evelyn kept moving. The rhythm had settled into something steady, not comfortable but predictable. Each step followed the last without argument. Her breathing stayed controlled, her shoulders slightly forward against the cold. The forest thickened. The trees stood closer together now, their trunks narrowing the space between them. The light dimmed further, turning everything a muted gray-green. It made distance harder to judge, made everything feel closer than it was. She didn't rush. Rushing meant mistakes. Her eyes stayed low, scanning the ground a few feet ahead of her, watching for roots, loose soil, anything that might turn her ankle or slow her down. Then something caught her attention. Not obvious, not at first, just different. She slowed, took another step, stopped, looked again. There, just ahead of her left boot, half buried beneath pine needles and damp moss, was a stone. Nothing unusual about that. Except it wasn't rounded like the others. It had an edge, flat on one side. Evelyn crouched carefully, lowering herself with both hands braced on her knees. The motion was slow, deliberate. She felt the strain in her joints as she went down, the cold settling deeper while she stayed still. She reached out, brushed the needles aside. The stone revealed more of itself, not large, about the size of her hand. One surface smoother than the rest, like it had been worn or shaped over time. She glanced around. There were other stones nearby. She hadn't noticed them before. Now she did. A few feet ahead, another one. Similar size. similar shape, partially hidden, but not completely. Evelyn straightened slowly, pushing herself back to standing. She stepped forward, closer to the second stone. Again, she nudged the ground with her boot, clearing away some of the debris. It matched the first. Not identical, but placed in a way that didn't feel random. She turned slightly, looked behind her. The first stone lined up with the second. Not perfectly, but close enough. Her brow tightened. Evelyn took a few steps forward, eyes scanning now with more intention. There. Another. And another. Faint. Subtle, but present. A line. Not straight like a road, but consistent. She shifted her position, stepping a little to the side, changing the angle of how she looked at them. From there, it became clearer. The stones followed a direction, slightly uphill, angled across the natural slope of the land. She crouched again. This time she pressed her palm against the ground between the stones. It felt different. Firmer. More compact. She scraped at it lightly with her fingers. The top layer gave way easily, needles, damp soil, but beneath it, the earth was packed tighter than the surrounding ground. Used, repeatedly, not recently. But enough. Evelyn sat back on her heels for a second, letting that settle. This hadn't been made by chance. Not erosion, not animals. People. At some point, someone had walked here, more than once. She looked up along the faint line of stones, following where it led. The trees in that direction looked no different than the rest. No clearing, no visible structure, just more forest. But the ground told a different story. Evelyn rose again, slower this time. Her legs protested slightly from the crouching, from the walking, from the cold. She waited until the feeling evened out before moving. Then she placed her boot directly beside the nearest stone. Tested the ground. It held firm, more stable than the surrounding forest floor. She took another step, aligning herself with the next marker. Same result. She looked back once more. The road was gone now. Not physically, but visually. The trees had swallowed it. There was no easy path back to it, no clear reference point, only the direction she had been moving. And this. Evelyn turned forward again. The stones didn't promise anything. They didn't suggest safety, but they suggested intention. And right now, that was more than she had anywhere else. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder, pulled her coat tighter around her neck, then stepped forward again. This time she followed the line. Carefully. Deliberately. Each step placed near where someone else had once stepped. Her breathing steadied again. The motion returned. But now it had structure, a direction that didn't come from guessing. She didn't feel hope, not yet. But she felt something close to it, something quieter, something that said, this might lead somewhere. Evelyn Mercer kept her eyes on the ground ahead, tracking each subtle marker, each shift in the soil. And for the first time since the car disappeared, she wasn't just moving to survive. She was following something. And that made all the difference. The ground stayed firm beneath her boots. Not perfectly even, not clean, but consistent. The subtle line of stones guided her, sometimes clearer, sometimes nearly invisible, but always there if she slowed down enough to notice. Evelyn moved with more purpose now. Still careful, still measured, but no longer drifting. The slope increased slightly. She felt it in her thighs, in the way her breath needed to deepen just a little more with each step. The air had cooled further, carrying that quiet edge that comes just before real cold sets in. Her fingers tingled again. She tucked one hand under her arm, then switched after a few steps. Small habits, necessary ones. The trees began to change. Not dramatically, but enough. They spaced out just slightly. The undergrowth thinned, less brush to step over, fewer low branches to push aside. Evelyn noticed that. People changed spaces when they used them, even if they didn't mean to. She slowed again, scanning ahead. The stones became harder to see here, the ground more exposed, less covered in needles, but the firmness remained. That same compact feel underfoot. She took another step, then stopped. Something ahead. Not movement. Not sound. A shape. At first it didn't register as anything specific, just a darker patch against the already dim forest. But as her eyes adjusted, the lines sharpened. Straight edges, angles, not natural. Evelyn didn't move closer right away. She stood still. Let her eyes take it in. A structure. Small. Low. Blended into the rock face behind it so completely, it almost disappeared unless you were looking directly at it. A cabin, or what had once been one. She exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not yet. Just acknowledgement. She stepped forward again. Slowly. Carefully. The ground opened into a small clearing, though calling it that felt like too much. It wasn't open sky. The trees still leaned in from all sides. But there was space. Enough for the structure to exist without being swallowed entirely. The cabin sat against a rise of stone, as if it had been built with the rock instead of against it. Evelyn stopped at the edge. Watched. Listened. No smoke. No sound from inside. No movement. The place felt still. Not abandoned in a sudden way, but quiet in a long, settled way. She took another step. Then another. The details became clearer. The roof sagged slightly on one side but held its shape. No visible holes. The wood was darkened with age, weathered by years of snow and rain. The edges softened, but the structure remained. The door faced her. Closed. No visible lock from this distance. To the left of the door, a narrow gutter angled down from the roof, rusted but intact, positioned to catch water and direct it away. Intentional. Evelyn noticed that. To the right, near the base of the wall, a small stack of stones, not decorative, not random, placed. She slowed even more, circled slightly to the side instead of approaching head-on. Her boots made little sound on the packed ground. She kept her steps light anyway. Her eyes moved over every detail. The corners of the cabin, the edges where wood met stone, the way the ground dipped slightly near the front, foot traffic over time. No fresh tracks, no signs of recent use, but also no collapse, no decay that would suggest it had been left to fall apart. Evelyn moved along the side wall, ran her eyes over the wood. The grain was raised in places, rough under age, but the boards were still tight, still holding. She reached out, paused, then touched it. Cold, solid, real. She withdrew her hand, stepped back, looked again at the door. There was no rush in her movements, no sudden decision. She walked a full circle around the cabin as much as the terrain allowed. The back was pressed closer to the rock, leaving little space. but enough for her to see that the structure wasn't leaning. It had settled into its place. Built to last. Or at least, built not to fail easily. Evelyn returned to the front. Stood at the base of the small step leading up to the door. The wood there was worn smoother than the rest. Subtle, but noticeable. People had stepped here. Many times. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder again. The thermos shifted slightly under her arm. Her fingers tightened around it. Then she stepped up. The wood creaked faintly under her weight. Not loudly, just enough to remind her it was still alive in its own way. She reached for the door. Her hand hovered for a second, then closed around the handle. Cold metal, unforgiving. She turned it. The latch resisted at first, then gave. A slow, dragging sound followed as she pushed. The door didn't swing open cleanly. It caught along the bottom edge, wood swollen from years of moisture. Evelyn leaned into it, adding just enough pressure. The resistance broke. The door opened inward. A long, low creak filled the space. Then stopped. The air inside was different, still, heavier, carrying a faint scent old wood, dust. And beneath it, something softer, something that lingered. Smoke. Not recent, but not completely gone. Evelyn didn't step in right away. She stood at the threshold. Let her eyes adjust. The interior was dim, shadows layered over shapes she couldn't yet fully make out. But it was enough. Enough to know this place had once held life, and might, just might, hold something again. She stepped inside. The air changed the moment the door closed behind her. Not warmer, but different. The wind stopped. The quiet shifted. It no longer pressed in from every direction. It stayed outside, muffled by wood and stone. Inside, the silence felt contained, manageable. Evelyn stood just past the doorway and let her eyes adjust. The room revealed itself slowly. One main space. No separate rooms. Just a single area that held everything. What remained of it, anyway. A table sat near the center, one leg slightly shorter than the others. A chair leaned against the wall. In the far corner, a small iron stove. That caught her attention. She didn't move toward it right away. Instead, she took a few careful steps further in, her boots stirring up faint dust that hung briefly in the air before settling again. The floorboards creaked under her weight, but not in a way that suggested weakness. Just age. The smell was clearer now. Dry wood. Old fabric. And yes, smoke. Faint, but real. Evelyn set her canvas bag down on the table. The surface tilted slightly, and she adjusted the bag so it wouldn't slide. Then she rested the thermos beside it. Her fingers lingered on it for a moment before she let go. She flexed her hands. The stiffness had deepened. Her knuckles felt tight, less responsive. She curled her fingers into her palms, then opened them again. The motion was slower now. She needed warmth soon. Her eyes returned to the stove. It was small, cast iron, blackened from years of use. A short pipe ran from the top into the wall, disappearing upward. She stepped closer, each movement deliberate. The door to the stove was closed. She reached for the handle. Cold. She pulled it open. Inside, only ash. Gray, fine, settled deep in the bottom. No remaining coals, no sign of recent fire. That didn't surprise her. What mattered was something else. Evelyn crouched slightly and looked around the base of the stove. There. A wooden crate, pushed just beside it. She pulled it closer. The wood scraped lightly across the floor, the sound sharp in the stillness. She paused, listening. Nothing answered. She opened the crate. Inside, bark. Dry. Not perfectly preserved, but usable. Beneath that, crumpled paper. Yellowed, edges curled with age. She picked one up carefully. The print was faint, but still readable. A newspaper. Dated years back. She didn't need the exact date. What mattered was that it was dry. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not yet. Just recognition. This was something she could work with. She looked around again, scanning more carefully this time. Near the wall, partially hidden behind the chair, she spotted a small tin box. She moved toward it, knelt, and opened it. Inside, a few matches. Not many. 4, maybe 5. She held the box in her hand for a moment, weighing it. That mattered. Each one would have to count. Evelyn stood again, slower this time. Her legs protested the movement, the cold settling deeper into her joints now that she had stopped moving. She didn't linger. She went back to the stove, set the crate down beside it. Then she began. Methodical. No wasted motion. She cleared a small space in the ash, brushing it aside with her fingers. The fine gray powder clung to her skin. She ignored it. Then she placed a layer of bark at the base. Not too much. Just enough. On top of that, she tore a strip of newspaper. Smaller pieces. Looser. Something that would catch easily. Her hands shook. Not violently, just enough to make the tearing uneven. She paused. Pressed her palms together briefly. Waited for the tremor to settle. Then continued. Once the small pile was set, she reached for the matchbox. Opened it. Counted again, Sue. She took one. Closed the box. Set it down carefully beside her. No second chances if she rushed this. Evelyn struck the match. The first attempt failed. The tip scraped against the side of the box without catching. A faint smell of sulfur, then nothing. She didn't react, just adjusted her grip. Tried again. The second time, a spark, then flame. Small, flickering. She moved it quickly but carefully toward the paper. Held it there. The edge darkened, curled, then caught. The flame spread unevenly at first, then steadied as it found the dry fibers. The bark followed, slower but stronger, feeding the fire as it grew. Evelyn closed the stove door halfway, leaving a small gap for air. She leaned closer. Watched. The fire struggled for a moment, shrinking, threatening to die. Then it took. The flame brightened, expanded, held. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Still not relief, but closer. She adjusted the door slightly, controlling the airflow. Not too much, just enough to keep it alive. The warmth came slowly. Not immediate, but real. It touched her hands first. A faint return of sensation. Then her face. A soft heat against the cold that had settled there. She sat back, lowering herself onto the floor beside the stove. The wood was cold beneath her, but the heat in front of her balanced it. Her hands rested near the opening. Not too close, just enough. The cabin made small sounds around her. Wood adjusting. a faint shift in the structure as the temperature changed. Outside, the wind continued its quiet work, but here, it didn't reach her. Evelyn leaned back slightly, her shoulders resting against the wall. The fire burned, small, uneven, but alive. She watched it, didn't look away, because right now, this was everything. And for the first time since the car disappeared into the trees, she allowed herself to believe something simple. She might make it through the night. The fire stayed small, but steady. Evelyn didn't feed it more than necessary. She knew better than to rush that part. Too much, too soon, and it would choke itself out. She let it build slowly, letting the heat settle into the iron, into the air, into her hands. Time moved differently inside the cabin. Outside, the light faded without her watching it. The gray turned darker, then deeper still, until the only light left came from the stove and the faint outlines of the room around her. At some point, she closed her eyes. Not fully asleep, just resting them. Her body leaned into the wall, her hands still held near the warmth. Every so often, she shifted slightly, adding a piece of bark, adjusting the door, keeping the fire alive. The night passed in fragments. Sound, silence, the soft crack of burning wood, the wind brushing against the outside walls. Then morning. It came without announcement. A gradual lifting of darkness near the edges of the room, a dull gray light pressing through the window, weak but enough to shape things again. Evelyn opened her eyes, her neck stiff, her back sore. She didn't move right away. Instead, she listened. The cabin held its quiet. The fire had settled into embers, still warm, still alive. That mattered. She leaned forward and fed it a little more, careful, measured. The flame returned slowly, not eager, but willing. Then she sat back again, took a breath, let it out. The cold hadn't disappeared, but it had changed. It no longer felt like something chasing her. It felt like something she could manage. That shift stayed with her as she pushed herself up to standing. Slowly, her knees protested, her lower back tightened. She waited until the stiffness eased just enough before taking a step. Then another. She moved through the cabin with purpose now, not searching blindly, assessing. Her eyes moved from one detail to the next. The table, the chair, the walls. She ran her fingers along the wood, feeling for drafts, for weak spots, for anything that might matter later. Everything told a story. Old, but intentional. This place hadn't been thrown together. It had been made and kept. That thought stayed with her. Evelyn crossed the room slowly, testing each board under her weight. Some creaked more than others, some held firmer. She paid attention to that. Always the ground. Always what held her up. Then a sound. Soft. Different. Her foot paused mid-step. She shifted her weight slightly, pressing down again. There it was. A hollow note. Subtle. But not the same as the rest. Evelyn didn't move immediately. She stood there, feeling it through her boot, letting the difference settle into something she could trust. Then she stepped back, looked down. The board didn't look unusual. Same color, same wear, same dust. But she knew what she had heard. She crouched carefully, lowering herself with one hand braced against her knee. Her fingers brushed across the surface. Dust lifted. The wood beneath was slightly smoother along the edges of that board. Worn differently. Used differently. She traced the seam where it met the next plank. The line was cleaner, straighter, more deliberate. Evelyn leaned closer. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she studied it. Not nailed the same way. Not fixed the same way. Her hand moved to her bag. She opened it, feeling inside until her fingers closed around something solid. A small metal nail, bent at one end. Not ideal, but usable. She brought it back to the floor. Positioned the tip along the seam. Paused. Listened. Still nothing. Then he pressed. Gently at first. The wood resisted. She adjusted the angle. Pressed again. This time the edge lifted just slightly. Enough. Evelyn shifted her grip, using both hands now. The motion was slow, controlled, careful not to crack the board or lose leverage. The nail slipped once. She reset it, tried again. The wood gave a little more. A faint creak. Then, a lift. The board rose just enough for her fingers to catch the edge. She set the nail aside, slid her fingertips underneath, and pulled. The plank came free with a soft, dragging sound. She set it aside carefully. Not dropped. Placed. Then she leaned forward, looked into the space beneath. Shallow. Not deep. But enough. Inside. Objects. Not scattered. Arranged. A small stack of papers, edges worn but kept dry. Beneath them, a folded piece of something thicker, map-like. And beside that, a metal tin. Smaller than the one she'd found earlier. Evelyn didn't reach in right away. She sat back on her heels. Studied it. This hadn't happened by accident. Someone had made this. Hidden it. And left it. For time. For whoever came after. Her breath slowed again, that steady rhythm returning. Then she leaned forward, reached into the compartment, and took the first piece of paper in her hand. The surface felt fragile, but intact. She lifted it carefully into the light. Her eyes moved across it. Reading. Not rushing. Because whatever this was, it mattered. And she intended to understand it. Evelyn held the paper closer to the window. The light wasn't strong, but it was enough. The ink had faded in places. Not completely gone, just softened by time. The paper itself had yellowed, edges slightly brittle, but still intact. Whoever had put this here had done it carefully. Kept it dry. Kept it safe. That told her something already. This wasn't trash. This wasn't forgotten. It had been meant to last. Her eyes moved across the lines slowly. Numbers first, dates, short notes, supplies, nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just records, simple, precise. She turned the page slightly, adjusting the angle to catch more light. There. A name. Printed cleanly at the top of the page. L. Mercer. Evelyn didn't react right away. Her eyes stayed on the letters. Her breathing didn't change. But something inside her shifted. She lowered the paper just a fraction, looked at it again. Same name, same handwriting across the rest of the page. Not elegant, not messy either, just controlled, measured, the kind of writing that didn't waste motion. She knew that writing. Not from memory in a clear way, but from repetition. Old envelopes, Receipts left on kitchen counters, notes written in margins of newspapers. Her father. Leon Mercer. Evelyn sat back slightly, the paper still in her hand. The room felt different now. Not warmer, but closer. She reached into the compartment again and pulled out another sheet. Same format, same structure, different date. Her eyes moved between them, comparing, noticing. The dates stretched across months, then years, not continuous, but recurring. Gaps in between, long ones. She felt something tighten slightly in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. Her mind began to place the pieces. Slowly. Carefully. She set the first paper down beside her, picked up the second, then the third. Her fingers moved more confidently now, sorting them into a loose order. Not perfect, but enough to see the pattern. The years lined up, and with them, memories. Not clear at first, just impressions. Her father being gone. Not once, not twice, but often, weeks at a time, sometimes longer. No explanation that ever stayed consistent. Work. Trips. Things that needed doing. He never spoke much about it. And she had stopped asking after a while. Evelyn's eyes moved back to the dates. One in particular held her attention. She traced it lightly with her finger, then closed her eyes. Just for a second. That winter. She remembered it now. The stove in their old house burning low. Her mother saying nothing about where he had gone. Just waiting. Then him returning, quiet. Tired. Carrying nothing anyone else could see. Evelyn opened her eyes again, looked at the paper, then at the others. The pattern continued. Each absence, each return, documented here. Not as explanations, but as proof. He had been coming here. This place, this cabin. She reached for the folded piece next, the thicker one. Careful. She unfolded it slowly, the creases stiff but not broken. A map. Hand-drawn. Rough in some places, precise in others. The cabin was marked, a small square against the edge of a sketched rock formation. From there, lines, paths, not roads. Trails, subtle ones, leading outward in different directions. Small symbols marked along them. Circles, X's, short notes written beside a few. Water, shelter, supplies. Evelyn leaned closer. Her eyes traced one of the paths, then another. She turned the map slightly, aligning it with what she remembered from the walk through the forest. The slope, the direction of the light, the feel of the ground beneath her feet. It matched. Not perfectly, but enough. This wasn't just a place. It was part of something larger. A system, built, maintained. She looked back at the name on the receipts. Mercer. Leon Mercer. Her father hadn't just passed through here. He had planned this, prepared it, returned to it. Again and again. Evelyn sat still for a moment. The papers spread around her, the map in her hands, the quiet of the cabin pressing in but no longer empty. It held something now. History. Not distant, not abstract, personal. She reached for the small metal tin last, turned it over in her hand. It felt heavier than expected, She didn't open it yet. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't need to rush. She already had enough to understand something important. The cabin hadn't appeared by chance. It hadn't been a lucky accident. It had been placed, maintained, left behind. And somehow, she had found it. Evelyn folded the map carefully, placed it beside the papers. Her movements were slower now, more deliberate, respectful. Then she leaned back against the wall again. Her eyes moved across the room, the stove, the table, the door. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. Not anymore. Because now she knew this place had been waiting. Not for her, exactly, but for someone. Someone who would notice. Someone who would look closer. Someone who wouldn't ignore what didn't quite fit. Evelyn Mercer lowered her gaze to the papers again, and for the first time since stepping into the cabin, she felt something shift fully into place. Not confusion, not fear. Understanding. And it stayed. Evelyn sat there with the papers spread across her knees, the map resting lightly in her hands, and the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. Not by someone standing in the room, but by someone who had already been here, who had walked these same floors, who had noticed the same things, and without saying a word, had left behind exactly what would be needed. She thought about her father. All those years she believed he had been drifting, disappearing, leaving pieces of his life behind without explanation. But he hadn't been disappearing. He had been preparing. Not for himself, for whoever came after him without a place to go. Evelyn looked at the stove, at the steady fire she had built with shaking hands, then at the map, then at the floor she had chosen to check instead of ignoring. None of it had been luck. It had been attention. The same quiet, stubborn attention that had carried her through the cold, that had made her notice what didn't belong, that had kept her moving when stopping felt easier. Outside, the wind moved through the trees again. Inside, the fire held, and for the first time she didn't feel like someone who had been left behind. She felt like someone who had arrived. So when the world decides you're done and leaves you somewhere it thinks you won't come back from, what do you notice first?